In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King leads a ceremony for the graduation of a new group of officers at the Royal Military College. More than 10,000 people are killed in the Philippines typhoon, and the death toll could rise once isolated coastal villages are reached. And the US Secretary of State says he hopes a nuclear agreement with Iran will be signed within months, and London and Tehran revive diplomatic ties. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, led a ceremony for the graduation of the 9th batch of officers at the Royal Military College. The King was welcomed by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mash'al Zebin, and the college's Commander, Brigadier General Khalid Ashra'a, as he arrived for the ceremony, which included a parade by the graduating officers. In remarks during the ceremony, Mufti of the Armed Forces, Yahya Al-Btoush, highlighted the role of the armed forces in defending the homeland. The college's commander reviewed his institution's role in qualifying and rehabilitating students militarily, physically and intellectually to become the leaders of the future. The King presented prizes to outstanding graduates towards the end of the ceremony, which was attended by their Royal Highnesses Prince Faisal ibn Hussein and Prince Rashid ibn Hassan, the Prime Minister and Defense Minister, as well as senior officers and heads of security departments and foreign military attaches. The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented diplomas to the graduates and wished them success in the various military units they will join. His Majesty the King sent a cable of condolences to President of the Philippines, Benigno Aquino, over victims of Typhoon Haiyan that struck a number of regions in the Philippines and claimed the lives of over 10,000 people. In his cable, the King expressed his deep sorrow and heartfelt condolences over victims of the typhoon and wished the injured a speedy recovery. And in the Philippines, survivors begged for help and scavenged for food, water and medicine after Typhoon Haiyan killed an estimated 10,000. President Benigno Aquino declared a state of national calamity and deployed hundreds of soldiers in the coastal city of Tacloban to quell looting. Reports emerged of thousands of people missing in one town that has been reached or has not been reached by rescue workers. International aid agencies said relief resources in the Philippines were poor, and 21 countries pledged to send relief aid. We get more in this report.
Thanks. International agencies rush in supplies and personnel to the central Philippines after a powerful typhoon killed an estimated 10,000 people. Japan sends a 25-strong emergency medical relief team that it hopes will be working in the field by Tuesday. Tokyo says troops could be next.
We will look at the severity of the situation on the ground, but we are also considering rapidly deploying the self-defense forces to deliver our medical assistance should the Philippines make such a request.
And here, South Korea's foreign ministry holds an emergency meeting to discuss its own aid response. Relief supplies cannot come soon enough. Friday's super typhoon displaced more than 600,000 people. Many of them have lost everything and are now struggling to survive without food, shelter or clean drinking water. The armed forces in the central Philippines has reported the deaths of nearly 1,000 of its personnel. It comes as desperation threatens to overwhelm military and rescue resources. Haiyan has now made landfall in North Vietnam, near the Chinese border, but has weakened to a tropical storm. Still, southern China feels the force of heavy rain and strong winds. Streets have been flooded and trees felled in Guangxi province. Schools have been shut and fishing boats have returned to their ports. And Typhoon Haiyan has not yet finished. The storm's also expected to be felt in Hainan and Guangdong.
And back here at home, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Al Hussein has sent a letter to His Royal Highness Prince Ali ibn Hussein, President of the Jordan Football Association and FIFA Vice President for Asia, expressing his hope that the national football team and Nashama will achieve the best results in the coming 2 games against Uruguay. In his letter, Prince Al Hussein expressed his pride in and appreciation for the efforts exerted to upgrade the level of Jordanian football. The Crown Prince said Prince Ali's diligent efforts and sincere support for the Nashama would galvanize the national team for more achievement at the regional and international levels. Meantime, the Public Security Department and the Gendarmerie have drawn a plan in coordination with the Jordan Football Association to organize Wednesday's playoff with Uruguay. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour met a delegation from the Council for European-Palestinian Relations in the European Parliament, led by member of the British House of Lords, Baroness Nuala Olone. Mansour briefed the delegation about Jordan's reform process and also discussed developments in the region, mainly the Palestinian issue and the Syria crisis and its repercussions on the national economy. Mansour said democracy in Jordan will become more and more a part of the political system, adding that transparent elections will also become part of the kingdom's democratic process. Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Judeh also met with the delegation to discuss U.S.-sponsored Palestinian-Israeli peace talks. Judeh briefed the team on the outcome of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's visit to the region and his talks with His Majesty the King and Palestinian and Israeli leaders. The minister pointed to the ongoing coordination between Jordan and the United States and all the concerned parties to ensure the success of the negotiations within the set timeline. Senate President Abdel Rauf Al-Rawabdi met Deputy President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, Al-Hou Al-Marbouh, and Secretary General Sergio Piazzi. Rawabdi spoke about the huge burden being shouldered by Jordan as a result of hosting Syrian refugees. He urged the international community to support the kingdom to continue its humanitarian role as far as the refugees are concerned. Lower House Speaker Atif Al-Tarawni also discussed with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean members issues of common interest. Tarawni stressed the importance of the Mediterranean countries' role in supporting the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. Tarawni also said Jordan backed efforts to reach a comprehensive and peaceful political solution in Syria. In a meeting with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean team, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Judeh reviewed efforts to end the Syria crisis and stop bloodshed and violence there. He also reviewed efforts to ensure the success of Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. Iran will grant UN inspectors access to a uranium mine and a heavy water plant within 3 months as part of a cooperation pact reached today. The deal signed by Tehran and the UN nuclear watchdog aims to allay concern about Iran's nuclear program. The deal may encourage hopes for next week's resumption of big power diplomacy after a decade of international deadlock on the issue. Here's more.
After 3 days of negotiations in Geneva, the foreign ministers from world powers sought to work out an interim agreement to curb Iran's nuclear program. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he hoped an agreement would be signed within months.
This is not a race to complete just any agreement. No deal is better than a bad deal, I have said many times, as has President Obama.
In a reference to Israel, Kerry said in a news conference during a visit to the United Arab Emirates that Washington is reassuring its allies in the region that his country would not abandon them and will continue to defend them against any external threat.
We will stand up for and defend our allies in this region against any kind of external threat or attack. So this is a strong strategic relationship, and I look forward to continuing our important dialogue on many issues of regional concern and to strengthening the relationship that the United States values very deeply.
Negotiations are underway to ensure that none of Iran's nuclear activities could be diverted towards bomb making. As part of a deal agreed between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency, Tehran will grant UN inspectors managed access to a uranium mine and a heavy water plant within 3 months.
We were given permission by the National Security Council to allow the agency's investigators to visit and investigate Arak's heavy water site.
The deal was signed by UN Nuclear Agency Chief Yukiya Amano to clinch an agreement to help allay Western fears that Iran may be seeking a nuclear weapons capability.
Under the framework for cooperation, Iran and IAEA will cooperate further with respect to verification activities to be undertaken by the IAEA to resolve all present and past issues.
Iran and 6 powers are searching for a preliminary agreement that would cap Iran's nuclear capacity and open up the program to UN inspectors. In exchange, they have offered phased, limited and reversible relief from sanctions. Iran, however, wants an early end to oil and banking sanctions. Britain, one of these 6 powers, together with the United States, France, Germany, China and Russia that are negotiating with Tehran, welcome the agreement. It said it was important that Iran addresses the substance of the agency's concerns about possible military dimensions to Iran's nuclear program. London is also reviving its diplomatic ties with Tehran. The UK's new charge d'affaires for Iran is expected to visit the country later this month, amid efforts to improve relations between the Islamic Republic and the West. Iran has also named its own charge d'affaires. Lu'ay Balqar for the news at 10.
Syria's opposition agreed to attend planned peace talks in Geneva. However, they said President Bashar al-Assad could play no part in a transitional government aimed at ending the civil war in the country. The Syrian National Coalition also demanded the release of women and children from Syrian jails and an easing of military sieges of rebel-held areas. No date has been agreed for the long-delayed talks. This report has more.
The Syrian opposition has conditionally agreed to participate in international peace talks in Geneva. The opposition coalition said that previous commitments set out at the first round of Geneva talks and the discussions in London at the end of October should form the basis for further discussions. The statement demanded guarantees that relief agencies would be allowed access to besieged areas, political prisoners would be released, and that any conference should result in a political transition. The Syrian National Coalition reached the consensus after 2 days of discussion in Istanbul.
Yes, the Syrian coalition agreed to attend Geneva too, under the condition of the London Communique and Geneva 1, and also under the Arab League Communique. Of course, he cannot attend anything talking about peace or transition without releasing all the prisoners and the priority for children and women. Also without opening humanitarian corridors. The need also to let all the relief agencies, the Red Crescent, the Red Cross, get to the besieged areas. You just cannot go to any conference without letting these people get the help they need.
After agreeing to participate in the Geneva talks, Syria's opposition was set to approve a cabinet led by their new provisional Prime Minister, Ahmed Taameh. The provisional government will be charged with restoring order in rebel-held areas where hundreds of brigades without a unified command threaten chaos. Anas Abda from the Syrian National Coalition said the candidates for the Defense and Interior Ministries would be recommended by the Free Syrian Army.
We have around 12 ministries. First of all, the foreign ministries will be part of the Prime Minister's portfolio. The Defense and Interior Ministries are recommended by the Supreme Military Council. The Interior Ministry is being recommended by the Supreme Military Council to be Mr. Ammar Qurabi.
Syrian National Coalition leader Ahmed Jarba had expressed willingness to attend the talks sponsored by the United States and Russia, but this was the first time the whole group had backed the idea. In the ongoing conflict, an explosion was heard and dark smoke was seen rising over the city of Homs. Children were covered in white dust, bleeding and screaming in pain. Hala Dababne for the news at 10.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with Ahmed al-Tayyib, the Sheikh of Al-Azhar in Cairo, to discuss the Palestinian peace talks with Israel. The visit is seen as an attempt from Palestinians to gain Egyptian backing in the upcoming negotiations with Israel. Abbas confirmed that Palestine's stance over Jerusalem will not change, regardless of the direction the peace talks might take.
The most important stance we have is that Jerusalem must be the capital of the state of Palestine, and Al-Tayyib has ensured that this should be our goal, and that we should all strive to keep the holy spot for Muslims, Al-Aqsa Mosque, safe and sound in the hands of the Muslim community.
After intensive training for 3 days in Turkey, the Uruguay football team have arrived in Amman. The squad will start training at Amman International Stadium tomorrow in preparation for the first leg playoff against Jordan's Al-Nashama on Wednesday. Al-Nashama coach Hussam Hassan and his Uruguayan counterpart will hold press conferences tomorrow. Novak Djokovic set up a title showdown against Rafael Nadal at the ATP World Tour Finals in London with a 6-3, 6-3 defeat of Switzerland's Stanislas Wawrinka. The Serb was too solid for Wawrinka in the day's second semi-final as he racked up a 14th consecutive victory over the Swiss player. Djokovic used all his defensive skills in the 8th game of the first set to convert a break point for a 5-3 lead and took the opener with an ace. Wawrinka hung on grimly in the second set after dropping serve, but Djokovic was clinical as he stretched his winning streak to 21 matches. A Soyuz capsule carrying an International Space Station crew of 3 has come back to Earth along with an Olympic torch that was displayed in open space as part of Russia's preparations for the Sochi 2014 Winter Games. Slowed by parachutes and break-in rockets fired to soften the impact, the capsule hit the Kazakh steppe on schedule after more than 3-hour descent from the space station. The Soyuz returned Russian cosmonaut Fyodor Yurchikhin, U.S. astronaut Karen Nyberg, and Italian Luca Parmitano, a European Space Agency astronaut, to Earth. The trio spent 166 days on the station. The torch they took into space is to be used to light the Olympic flame when the first Olympics held in Russia since the Soviet era begins in February in the Black Sea resort city of Sochi. Finally, relatively cold tonight in most regions and mild in the Jordan Valley with southeasterly fresh winds. Tomorrow there will be a chance for scattered showers in some areas, while winds will be southwesterly brisk, blowing dust in the desert region. Further south, the port city of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to dust, especially in the Badia desert region. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here is a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King leads a ceremony for the graduation of a new group of officers at the Royal Military College. More than 10,000 people are killed in the Philippines typhoon, and the death toll could rise once isolated coastal villages are reached. And the U.S. Secretary of State says he hopes a nuclear agreement with Iran will be signed within months, and London and Tehran revive diplomatic ties. And that's the end of tonight's news. I'm Raad Liptush. Thanks for watching and have a good night.